Hey guys, Mark Ferrasci, Protect Dog Training. I got Buddy out with me today. O.P.U, good, good. That's my boy. Quiet. Good, quiet. Good. Quiet. Good. Couché. Couché, pas bouger. Now, I don't know how well this is going to go, guys, but I wanted the assis, couché. Good. Assis. Yup. Couché. Double. Couché. Assis. Good. He knows I've got balls on me. He's all pumped up. He just got out of the kennel, and I come out here and I want to do a yak session. So 30, 40 minutes of yak session. You think I'm going to succeed with this? Not when I get my dogs as pumped up as I do. A Dutch Shepherd with all kinds of energy. Couché. Good boy. Nabble. Good. Good. O.P.U. Let's do a sideways one, huh? Pas bouger. Look a little better on the camera. I always have a hard time with my camera, guys. I just got a little phone. I got nobody to sit and follow and be right on me when they're doing all this stuff and fancy video and digital magic that they do. Buddy. Couché. Assis. Buddy. Here. Not quiet. And I did a little hand movement. You didn't see it. It's about the ball because he wants that ball in between my legs. Yes. Remember where the dog's mental mind state is at right now. He just got out of the kennel, right? Buddy, out. I didn't take all the time, Assis, to sit there and work and make sure the dog was in flow and he's perfect for the video and all the things that you see people do that you don't even realize that they do to make it really look good and appealing and have that Hollywood flair, right? O.P.U. And there's no begrudging that. Obviously I say it because I envy it. You know, I wish I had somebody to do the videoing with me and we could polish this out and I'd be the world's best trainer, wouldn't I? O.P.U. Because you'd see all that digital and you'd only know that image that I built, right? There's a lot more behind a lot of this stuff than you see, but it's all good. All right, so let's go back into trying to catch the whole thing of what I was trying to do with kind of going over my life history, right? We started with Princess. We went into Sergeant, where I was about 16 years of age. What spurred that whole motivation towards that, somebody ripped off my pot plants. That lifestyle's way behind me, guys. But that was part of my childhood. I had a little bit of a rough edge growing up. It was just part of what I went through in life. And I'm not going to hide from it. It's a lot of people's lives, you know, trying to keep from getting drawn in by these things that happen in their neighborhood. And when you're around people, like I was in a small town, and everybody's doing it, all your friends are doing it, even when I knew I wanted to quit. You know, I'll talk about cocaine as an example. I wanted to quit cocaine. And I stopped doing it, told my friends I was stopped. But every time I turn around, somebody was going to go get an 8-ball. Somebody was going to go get, and I'd be going, you know. So I had an offer to go to LA, and I ended up, this is after Pro Train. I went to Pro Train, got on the bus, lived there for 2 years, eat, breathe, sleep dogs, came back, did my own business. Let's go ahead and get this in the rest. That's why I wanted to do this close enough because I'll lose track of where I'm at in my layers of how I went through the transition of over 30 years in the business, right? O.P.U, I don't think I'm going to give you all 30 years, but I'm going to give you the highlights. And the highlight, one of the main highlights, couché, pas bouger, is couché, pas bouger. Good. He's pumped. Assis. Good boy. Couché. Here. Good. Nope. Quiet. Good. Quiet. Good. Communication, guys. All about body tone, body language, to be able to convey to the dog what you want. This is one of the big tricks with leaking, by the way. If you, O.P.U, trying to build this whole crescendo and get a dog that's doing things fast and sharp, and you have a dog with high energy outflow like this, a lot of times they'll do what's called leaking, where they'll get all excited and start whining and going crazy, couché. So the only answer that I've found is, one, don't ever let them get started, nip it in the bud as quick as you can. And then two, have enough communication baseboard that you can communicate to them what you're after. So teaching them the word quiet and having that contextually be available to them in other areas so they can understand that when you start to go to it and trying to say quiet, right? And trying to take their energy level down a peg or two. It's a tough job. You're trying to get a dog that's animated, that has all kinds of energy out on the field, and you've been building this whole thing, and you've got that kind of an energy behind a dog like Buddy or Oscar Mora with Guapo. I mean, then you start to see the dog leaking, and if you don't nip it in the bud right away and make sure you contextualize it in other areas, teaching him the word quiet. 1,001 to 0, I have a little trick where I take the dog up and get him all squirrely and I nip him back down, right? I call it 1,001 to 0. And then being able to convey that you want his whole body language to go to 0. Energy level goes down. When I talk quiet and I'm real silent, what does that do? It makes you have to reach, right? You have to reach to be able to hear it. And that makes your whole energy level and your mental mind state changes, right? And that's what we're doing with him right now. He's hearing me talk and he's starting to calm, right? So that's what it's all about. Your ability to manipulate the dog's drive states as you're building him, and training is more than just heel, sit down, stay, right? So I'm getting off subject because I'm getting into him, but it is something that's a challenge for a lot of people in that regard. So we're going to go back to my story. We talked about Princess, me being a 12-year-old child. I got her. I went through the transition of going back to my dad's, and I got a little moped. I was all over, and I was getting into my experimentation phase that I mentioned, where I was doing all the work to get her to learn as many words as I can. How many hand signals can she learn? How much can I give her as far as hand signals and verbals? That's what I was up to at the time, right? Then, about 16 years of age, I got my pop plates ripped off and it ticked me off, and so I went out and started looking for another dog, and I started thinking about bite work. And at that same time period, William Kohler's Guard Dog Training book came out, and that was my nucleus. I went after that. And that was kind of my nucleus already. I'd been doing my obedience with that avoidance and escape training that is very paramount with his whole method. That everybody was doing that back then. Even Ed Frawley calls it yank and crank. And that's kind of my terminology nowadays as well. So then I got Sergeant, and I went in and started teaching him, and I got my friends and did mail order to get the sleeves. And you should have seen some of these sleeves. I remember one that was really slippery in it, but I could see that it was going to be hard on the teeth. But it caused the dog to have to bite. If he didn't bite, he wasn't going to be able to hang on to this thing. This stuff is done and gone now because it was all these people creating the training tools that we didn't have really on the market yet, right? So that it was a very interesting subject to me in that regards. So it's something that I went through as far as Sergeant was concerned. And then I went out and I knew I wanted to become a professional dog trainer, and I worked real hard towards getting myself pointed in the right direction by hooking up with a professional training firm in my town. And I took Sergeant out and I did my demo dog. It was my first demo dog. And I went and I learned the value of having a good demo dog. Any training firm that you have, they usually always want to have one dog that's theirs that they can show off and give a demo to their customers to show the customer what they can do, right? And I've been doing that my whole life. I mean, every dog I've got is a demo dog. Joker, Buddy, it's all about the demo dog, right? And these dogs are trained, and we put a lot of love and care into them, but there are companion dogs. He goes, not him, but Joker sleeps with me. He goes everywhere with me. That's what made me start thinking about talking about this series and talking about my life history, because I started thinking about how many dogs have I had on my bed. I had Joker on my bed the other night, and I'm cuddling with him, and I'm going, how many dogs have I had on my bed over the years? And it's been a lot. And in somebody like me, it's not a dog that you just put in the kennel and you go off and you go do things. He's in the kennel. He's with me 24/7. He's with me all the time. He sleeps in my bed. He gets up with me. I take him to the restaurant. He's in the back of the truck. I go to the restaurant. I come back here. When I do find the time that I need to put him away, I put him away and take off for an hour or 3, maybe 4 hours at a time, come back, and he's here. Just lately and just recently, 5-year-old dog, I put him in this brand new kennels that I got set up, and he's breaking his teeth. Why? Because he's used to being with me all the time. And I'm bummed because now I got a dog that's got broken. I can't sell him, you know. And it's not going to hurt his bite work, believe me, because of where there breaks. I got to keep an eye on him and make sure he's all right. But he's now broken a lower incisor and then a topper canine on the opposite side, and within 2-3 weeks. he did it once, and I said, dang it, I can't put him in the kennel. And then I forgot, and another week later went by, and I put him out there because I want to have him exercise. I want to have him have more space to be able to be, you know, having exercise and being free instead of being stuck in one of the little boxes, you know, the very kennels. The very kennels aren't bad, it's just that you don't want to leave them in more than 4 hours is my rule, right? If I'm going to go somewhere and I'm going to come back in an hour or two, it's no big deal, but you leave them more than 4 hours, you start to get a behavior pattern of saying, I've got to go to work, and you think it's okay to leave your dog in a kennel all day. That's just not right. So these things we go through. I mean, as dog trainers, this is the sort of thing that you have to face. All right, so back to Sergeant. I took him out and used him as my demo dog to get the job with the training firm. Canine Behavior Center, that was my first stint. Worked with them for about 2 years. Learned all the lecture format, learned all the verbiage, and learned to give lessons in parks. You know, 8, 12 people in a class every week, and sometimes 5, 6 days a week because we had classes in every town, right? So after a couple years, they knew I wanted to do bite work because that's all I talked about, what I was doing with Joker and wanting to do bite work, and I got them to help me out a little bit with it too. I ended up going to Oakland, California, and right after I graduated, and that's all I cared about. They had already had me a job lined up with a training firm in Oakland, one of the largest training firms in the Oakland Bay Area called ProTrain. And ProTrain had, at the time when I went to go work for them, had a facility on San Pablo Avenue. They ended up growing up into a place where they ended up having another one by the Coliseum, and they grew into 5 different pet stores, and they grew up to be a pretty large company until it transitioned in that late 90s or something like that, whatever it was. The partnership broke up and they ended up disbanding it in the Bay Area. Though one of the owners is still up here in the in San Diego area, and it's still called ProTrain. And he's the guy that basically was my boss at the time, and he was a San Rafael Seeing Eye Dog student and trainer at their facility before he started the ProTrain. And so he had a lot of background in that regards that he was bringing to the table and ended up rubbing off on me. And a lot of that was about environmental, you know, people, places, things. Environment is what they use for seeing eye dogs. They have to have a dog that's secure, that can go on buses, going flying, doing all the things that they do, and they have to have them in those environments. So the training that they put on those dogs in that regard is really important for them. You know, the dog, basically it boils down to seeing eye dogs and service dogs have to be a dog that you can take any place with you, but more importantly, they have to fit in. And this is what he impressed on me, was that if you see a service dog, is a great example, and the dog's not acting properly, he's barking, he's doing behaviors, he's going after another dog or whatever, you can almost guarantee you that's not a dog that's been trained by a service dog company, because the service dog company is going to make sure that those parts of that temperament in the dog have been polished out to where that dog fulfills the need of the dog to be out in public. The dog should be unobtrusive. He should be able to mold into the environment where people hardly even know he's there. You know, when they go into restaurants, he goes up underneath the table, he's been trained to. They get on a bus, he goes up underneath the table, he tucks his tail. Right? And they train him to do this, and they train him to be almost unobtrusive. And then when they educate their people that take these animals to go out and give them a service dog or seeing eye dog, they train them that that is the mental attitude that they should have. Because to be accepted in society and to be in the restaurants and the buses and everything, they have to mold in. Otherwise they become a nuisance, and now that will draw negative attention on them and they will lose their program. Right? That was the idea behind it. That was the whole nucleus of that start. Remember, San Rafael Seeing Eye Dogs is probably one of the best training firms in the country as far as seeing eye dogs. There are several other organizations nowadays that have grown, and now service dogs have become a big thing, but it's become a big problem because we got the internet, and these guys are bootlegging their dogs onto the planes and doing things that they shouldn't, and not going through the proper procedure to make sure they do have a very qualified service dog that fulfills the need of a service dog. Not just to pick up the keys or hit the light switch or do what they've been trained to do in that regards, but to do the overall encompassing image of that dog's temperament, what he should be in our society. It's very important, because if you don't, you end up having a negative mind. That's what's been happening. A lot of the people putting their dogs in a cart and going into the stores, and they feel entitled, this entitlement that's coming with it, and this attitude of entitlement. My dog should be able to go anywhere. And then they get cute and they put a friggin' harness on the dog and it says service dog, and they're not a service dog, right? And it's obvious by the way the dog acts in mine. So I've got a lot of things that are from my history and my past that cause me to have the opinions that I have today, right? And that one of those areas is service dogs and seeing eye dogs, service dogs of any type, and how it's morphed and become a problem in our society nowadays is a really thing that sticks in my craw, right? All right, so back to sergeant. I ended up getting on a bus at 18, about a week or so after I graduated, and I was on a bus and I went to pro train by myself, no dog. I left the dog back at home. Got off the bus and my boss was there to meet me, and I was scared like you wouldn't believe, because here I was out of my comfort zone, out of my cultural comfort zone. I had grown up in a little small town in central coast of California. And in my town, I think as I grew up, I think I remember 2 or 3 black people that were in my town. There was hardly any at the time. Okay, and so cultural shock, I went to an area that had 99% African American, and I was the only one that was this little white boy sitting in this neighborhood, right? And it was scary, and I didn't have any didn't have any transportation at the time. I took a bus, and all I cared about was doing what I loved to do. So moving in and living in the back of this kennel wasn't a problem for me. Right? It was something that I was very willing to accept and to do. And then I got to the facility and I met a gentleman by the name of O.J. of all things. A little small African-American dude. Stocky little guy. A Vietnam vet. He knew what he was doing. He was a great mentor because he had been in Vietnam. He had been over there working the dogs in the Special Forces and doing a lot of clandestine type of stuff with the Special Forces and things that weren't talked about at the time. In fact, he told me a lot about it, but he told me I couldn't tell anybody. For years, I kind of kept my mouth shut and I didn't talk about it because I was told that this was top secret stuff. Right? And they were doing things over there that they needed to do in a war footing, but they didn't want to have it known to the public, right? So these things weren't talked about, and I still today kind of honor that, right? But they were doing some elite type of stuff. The dogs were taught to be silent. They were in a jungle warfare. Dog training and the canines nowadays over in Iraq and over in the urban warfare that we've got now, going to the towns, kicking in doors, doing things, they've totally changed their way of working the canine because they need to, because it's not a jungle warfare, right? Those jungle warfare dogs became very keen with their nose, and they could smell the enemy because the enemy ate different things, and their pores and everything put out a different smell and a different scent, and that caused them to be able to key in, and it was a game of stealth. The enemy would be moving supplies and everything down, and we would set up ambushes, and they would do the same thing to us. And so that jungle warfare was about being quiet. It was a sentry dog, and his job was to be out point with the handler. And the handler got so keen on being able to read his dog's body language that he knew when the dog was telling him something was going on. And that dog, because of a war situation, picked up on all the fear, the adrenaline, everything else. And that team between the handler and the dog was amazing. That's what I picked up from my mentor, OJ. And it was just such a neat thing to hear the stories and to hear some of the things that he went through over there as an African American. One of the first things I learned, and I didn't know anything about this, remember, I grew up in a little small town that was mostly all white, and I learned about prejudice from his standpoint because he grew up back in the South, and I didn't know any of the history of the southern states and what we went through in prejudice, and so it was something that I learned about, and I'm still totally ignorant because it's not my culture. You know, the African American has a culture, and they have a history that I value because I lived in that environment for 2 years. I got to know them real well, and I can still go. When I came to LA, I got really tight with all the guys in the South Central and everything. There's a whole community of people that I feel proud and very honored to be able to say that they're my friends, you know. So I won't get into that, but so OJ was my mentor, and for 2 years he taught me a lot of things that you just don't learn, you know. There's a big group of them. So then I came back to San Luis, and I had a girlfriend in San Luis, and I got my business started, and I started my first business was Dog Obedience and Protection Unlimited. Never name your company with such a large name. I learned real quick because I couldn't say it right. And I tried to give it hyphens and a O.P.U. O.P.U. doesn't sound good. Dog Obedience Protection Unlimited. I had a great logo. I had great marketing. I was kind of like some other people that I know that are really clean with their marketing. Everything's perfect. Good color code, fonts, everything. I was into that as a kid because this was my first business. So I was enamored. I was learning about business, and I wanted to be a good businessman. And I took off and I did all the right things. I had Yellow Pages ads. I had magnetic signs on my truck, and I was the only my other competitor was the ones that I had started with when I got there, and I came back and I started my own business in my small hometown. So Dog Obedience Protection Unlimited. And I was very proud of that. I drove all over town, and that became my image, just as it is for a lot of years. Mark Farashi, the dog trainer. I've been Mark Farashi, the dog trainer, for a lot of years. And then I told myself that if I didn't make a go of it after 5 years, that I would start and I would look for another job, and I knew I had to survive. I had to pay the rent. I've got to have money coming in that I can afford to pay the rent. So after 5 years, I ended up having to go out and do other things. Okay, and I terminated my business, and I've done that 2 or 3 times over the time that I've been alive on this earth, right? And I probably will again. That's why I really market myself nowadays. I don't go crazy after ProTech and go crazy after my logos and really center on that and really get into my end, because I know that business comes at me all the time. I don't have to worry about it. I've got a pretty good reputation in that regards, and so I'd rather just use Mark Farashi, the dog trainer, and do that, because if I ever want to close the doors on this business, I can do that and go work for somebody else real easy. And that's kind of why I do what I do. And the reason I don't get into the marketing is I don't want to be tied down to my business, and nowadays, down to the computer. And nowadays everything's about this social media. I got to be on every platform. I got to get onto TikTok. I got to do all this crap. And to me, I'd rather be out here training the dogs. Buddy, couche, you weren't going to break, were you? He says, yeah, I was. All right, let him have a release, or we're going to have him releasing on his own. I don't want that. Buddy, good boy, good, buddy. Yep, good boy. All right, come here. Come here, let me get your head in another place, okay? We started out with our little demo. All right, you go on, nope, you go play. Go on, free hunt. You go free hunt. Go on, go play. Good boy, good. Good boy, you go potties, good boy. So back to my story. I came back to San Luis, and I had Sergeant, and I did my own business for 4 or 5 years, and then I fell into some other things. And in this business, it's kind of that way. One of the biggest things that I tell, I'll go ahead and end the story now. I've been yakking for so long, and I'll extend it. We got plenty more stories to tell. But after my first business, buddy, no, go play, go on, you go play, go on. I ended up going into other things, like I said, and we'll talk about that the next session. But one of the big things that I tell kids that come at me that want to get into the dog training profession is, how do we get into it? There's a lot of different ways. Nowadays, unfortunately, it's all about going out and getting into a club, and what I call the age of the decoy. And we have this social thing going on, because they've got catching dogs, and they're all high on that, and they may have one dog, and they work the one dog in a club for half a year or so. All of a sudden they get certified for PSA, or got a kid that's up the street here that's certified in Street League, right? And that's admirable, don't get me wrong. We need our decoys, don't get me wrong. But it doesn't make you a trainer, okay? And all of a sudden they'll go, poof, I'm a trainer, and they'll hang a shingle out. They have no clue how far away they are from being a real trainer. If you really want to become a trainer, you need to go to a school like Michael Ellis's school, or Tom Rose, or something that's really got some good accreditation, right? Get yourself through that school, and don't think in your mind that I'm going to pass this school and I'm going to go hang a shingle out, right? Do the opposite. Go through their school, and then search and find somebody that you respect, somebody that's already got an established business that's doing business, and go work for them for another 2 years. Right? Like I did in the back of that kennel. Eat, breathe, and sleep dogs. Get up, scoop shit, work your way through it, pay your way, right? But that's not our society nowadays. We live nowadays in a society of instant gratification. So what that means is that people will come up and they say, poofta, I'm a dog trainer. Okay, and how I equate this is the problem with our whole society. It's not just dog training, right? Nowadays I can go out and buy a really beautiful camera. It's all totally automated. It's got a little automatic switch. I switch it on, and I go out and I start taking really nice pictures, and it does everything for me, and poofda, I'm a photographer. You know how far away you are from being a photographer? A long way, because in my age, my girlfriend was a photojournalist. She went to Cal Poly Tech and went to go out and get a degree in photojournalism, right? That's a real photographer. That's somebody that works real hard and learns it, and they understand what an f-stop is on the camera. They understand how to operate it without it being on automatic, and all the things that come with it, right? And so that is the key in my mind, is if you really want to be good at your career, and you really want to be better than the Joneses and all the people that are out there going, poof, I'm a dog trainer, earn it, pay your way, just like I did. I went out and I worked hard, and then over the years I've worked for other facilities, and I'm going to tell more stories about that as well. But I've earned my way, you know. I'm not too bad at what I do. Now, do I go out and compete? I don't think that makes me a good dog trainer. I don't have to compete. Just do I have to conform to society and go out and follow a criteria? I don't think so. What I have to do is be able to educate my customers and teach them to have a good relationship with their dog so they get what they need out of the animal, and that we can solve problems. Because a lot of times people will end up having a lot of neurosis, things that they cause without realizing it, right? And they cause these problems because they don't understand dog psychology. And then dogs come to you and they have all kinds of neurosis. You've got to be able to spot it, you've got to be able to figure it out, and then you have to be able to figure it out from the dog's concept, but also be able to get the owner to understand what they're doing and what they've done to cause this problem, and get them to learn and grow with their animal to a point where now we don't have that problem anymore. And it takes time. I've got a dog that I've got from Hollywood right now that's been in the house, a pandemic dog. He's about 18 months old, and he got locked in the house, and his customers have no clue. And so now my job is to get him fixed with me, and then to be able to take him back to the owner and get them to do the right thing. And that takes time, it takes work. And we don't always succeed because the customer is a big part of what we do. You know, if they get off the couch, as I always say, and they put the hard work into working with their animal, and they learn, they grow, they're gonna have an animal that they're very proud of. You know, but a dog is not a robot, right? A dog is a very emotional creature that lives off emotions, and you need to understand that in that respect, they're a lot like us, right? They have different drives and they have different dog psychology, things that make them tick versus us, but the big picture is that they are very much an emotional creature, and the good dog trainers that are out there understand that. So I'll let you go. That is my stint from all the way up to Dog Obedience Protection Unlimited, so for my first business. And then from there, I go to LA and I meet Cesar Millan. So we'll talk about that more as we go along. I thank you very much. Mark Ferresh, Protect Dog Training, and Buddy, O.P.U. O.P.U. Good boy, O.P.U. Good boy. Couche. Nope. Couche. I try to meet the things that they require in the sports. Elbows on the ground. It's one of the areas that I always, with Joker, if you ever see him, he never puts his elbows on the ground because I didn't mark it right, I didn't catch it. But that's one of the criteria in sport or in competition, right? O.P.U. Couche. Couche. Good. Yes, good boy. Yeah. Buddy, out. Couche. Assi. Couche. Here. Good. Yes, good boy. All right, Mark Ferresh, Protect Dog Training, and Buddy. Good boy, bud. Good boy.